Welcome to the Quantum Biology Collective podcast, where we break down the practical strategies of this emerging science, starting with healthy light habits and going wherever the quantum superhighway takes us. This is your host, Meredith Oke, and we'd also love to hear from you. Visit www.quantumbiologycollective.org and click QBC newsletter to join the conversation. A major focus of this podcast is exploring the difference between healthy light and toxic light. As the research piles up, this is becoming a major health issue of our time. If you haven't listened to episode number 38 with Dr. Martin Moore-Eid, where he breaks down exactly how bad lighting contributes to all chronic illness, definitely check that out. So, now that we've established that artificial light at night is a toxin, the biggest question is, what do we do? In this episode, we dive into one of the most frequently asked questions. If these bright white LEDs are so bad, what light bulbs should I use? Here to give us the answer is Daniel Ebbett, the founder of Block Blue Light, a company that specializes in circadian-friendly lighting solutions. Daniel also transformed his own personal health by optimizing his light environment. Enjoy. All right. Daniel Ebbett, welcome to the Quantum Biology Collective podcast. It is a pleasure to have you here.
Amazing to be here. Really excited to just dive into all things light and health.
Amazing. So yes, one of the most frequently asked questions that I encounter is, about light bulbs. Obviously, when you start talking about light, that's the first thing that comes up. So we're going to dive into light bulbs in this episode. And we're not talking about like therapeutic light or red light therapy. We're talking about like light bulbs when you walk in your house and you need to see and you turn on a light switch. We're talking about those kind of light bulbs. Or if you're going to bed, reading before bed and you need to be able to see your book, not your iPad, what to use. So that's what we're talking about today. So Daniel, tell us, you're the founder of blockbluelight.com. You make these amazing light bulbs. They're really good. And we actually had someone in our group chat of the Quantum Biology Collective. Someone had been recommended a light bulb company. They were like, is this good? And then someone else came back in and they were using your light bulbs as the standard benchmark. And they're like, they're okay, but they're not as good as they're not as good as Daniel's. So it was just a nice reaffirmation that you make a really high quality product. So how did you get into this game? How did you end up being someone who makes circadian friendly light bulbs?
Yeah, I'd like to say that that was always what I've been doing, career and lighting and health. But no, my story is actually came out of a own personal need, right? So my career was actually in IT. So I went to university, had these big aspirations of climbing the corporate ladder and just, getting a big job in the big city and doing that sort of thing. And so I moved over to Sydney, Australia and started my career there. And at the time I would consider that I considered myself like into health and well-being. Like I was in the gym, I was competing in powerlifting at the national level over there. Wow. And so sort of like was taking quite like fitness and diet quite seriously. But I guess I wasn't considering other aspects of health, like stress and all the other things that I've since learnt about. So as soon as I got into the sort of the office environment, so working on screens all day under fluorescent lighting, and then being the graduate, I got lumped with all the kind of out of hours work. So I'd have to come on and log back on at like 11 o'clock at night and be on screens for another like hour or so before I go to bed. So my lifestyle was quite interesting. I'd be getting up at like 6 a.m. in the office kind of before the sun rises, under artificial light on screens and under fluorescent lighting all day. Then I'd leave the office at like 6:30, 7 p.m. So it's dark. I haven't really been outside in natural light. And I go into the gym and train for an hour, again, under artificial light. Then I go home and I work on a screen again. And it's just like rinse and repeat, right? And so it didn't actually take that long until I started to get quite severe insomnia and quite severe migraine attacks. And for me, this was like quite new and bizarre. I was like, I don't know what's going on. Like I absolutely could make no connection between the environment that I was living in and that actually impacting my health. I was like, oh, maybe I'm not dieting well enough, or maybe I'm not training hard enough, because I'm like, those are the things
yeah, because it's really mind-boggling, because you're young, you're super fit, like you're doing all the things people have always done. You're going to work, you're working out, and it's like, but everything's kind of falling apart. Without that piece of the puzzle, it is really, really perplexing.
Yeah. And so I kind of did what most people would do, is I went to my like general practitioner doctor, right? And I was like, hey, I can't sleep, and like I've got severe migraines and stuff during the day. And they just went through this. We kind of just went around in circles with like a whole cocktail of different prescription drugs, all right? Like, and then it was like off label to like antipsychotics and antidepressants. And then it was like,
oh God.
I know. And I was like,
so it's like, okay, well, we'll give you this to sleep, and then we'll give you this for your migraines, and then we'll give you this because for what, like the side effects of doing that.
Yeah. And like, honestly, it just made me feel like I was just a zombie and drugged out. And I was like, I'm not even like sleeping. I'm kind of like just being tranquilized and then waking up feeling like so much worse. And like over time, like, this is like kind of six to 7 month journey of this. And just at that point, I'm like, okay, I had to give up the gym. Like I had to give up powerlifting. I was just like barely trying to keep it together at work. And I kind of went back to the doctor after none of all this would work. And I just remember them being like, wow, like it's in your head. Like there's no explanation for it. Like you're a fit, young, healthy guy. Like this is a psychological issue. Like, and I was like, nah, that I don't accept that. Like, because I was like, I knew what it felt like to feel good, and now I don't feel good. And I feel like I'm not living these really unhealthy lifestyle. Like, how does that make sense? Right. So I guess their
response is like, we don't have an answer. It doesn't make sense based on what we know. So you must be crazy.
Pretty much, and maybe, and I was like, well, I don't accept that. Right. So like, I was like, well, I'm not coming back to see you again. Like you, and that's, I guess, and this is quite earlier on, like, we're talking in 2014 sort of thing. So like we didn't have so much information readily available to us. There wasn't all these podcasts around. Like I was in the infancy. I remember maybe I just started listening to like Dave Asprey's like first season of his podcast. Thought it was like just
that was the like I think we're all drinking bulletproof coffee around that time.
I was like, I was like putting butter in my coffee. I was like, look how cool I am, right? Like, and then I actually stumbled upon Jack Kruse, believe it or not, like back in his early day, and bought his book. And then I was just like, this is really interesting concepts. I've just never like heard about anything around like light and impacting our biology and what you eat and different times of the seasons and all this sort of stuff. And I'm just like, at this point, I still had made no connection. It was actually my issues, but I was like so intrigued by like a completely flipping what I believed is like what you need to do to maintain optimal health or be, live an optimal life. Because I always thought, again, it was exercise and diet. And I was like, hold on a minute, like this guy here is like paying out all the diet gurus saying they've got it all wrong. Like, I was like, okay, well, let's actually, I'm listening here. And so that's when I started to apply some of his concepts, or, just particularly around the sort of light I've been exposed to, and trying to bring myself back a bit more of an alignment to like a more natural lifestyle in terms of light exposure. So, I started to actually go outside a lot during the daytime as much as I could. And then the concept of blue light blocking glasses didn't really exist back then. So I kind of like searched around the internet on Amazon. Amazon doesn't even exist in Australia. So I had to like shop on Amazon US and found like the pair of like the UVX glasses and ordered them and started playing around with that as well. And at that point I was like, holy shit, this is the first time in like over a year I've seen like some positive change, right? From something, tried all these other things, been to all the doctors, and it was all just going the other way. And this is the first time I've seen something move in the positive direction. So I'm just going to keep doing more of this and learning more of like all this sort of stuff. And I guess
being mindful of your light environment was the first thing to move the needle in terms of
and particularly
all the
at
stuff
night,
you tried. Yeah.
Particularly at night, right? Because I was like, oh my God, I'm just like, in my room, like on my screens, and like all the lights on the screen, and then like till like midnight, and then no wonder I'm sitting there just like looking at the ceiling trying to sleep at like 2 a.m, right? It's just like,
yeah.
So like just being able to like still, obviously I've still got a career, I've still got to make a living, but how can I actually alter the lifestyle using different techniques, like putting on a pair of glasses to block out the blue light while I'm working at night, was like the game changer for me. Like, and it was like, okay, well, that was like step one. It's like, okay, well, what about getting up and seeing sunrise in the morning and like actually getting light exposure before I go into the office and start doing work during the day? What about then going out, and then I was like, okay, well, let's start to incorporate like micro breaks during the day. So I'm going outside every 2 hours sort of thing, even just for 5 minutes. It was these sort of things that really started to move the needle significantly for me. And it's not like it was an instant change overnight, because I mean, like, it takes your circadian rhythm time to entrain itself. So to and unravel significant sleep deprivation over many months causes hormonal dysregulation, right? So that needed to undo itself as well. So it was a long journey back into optimal health, but it definitely for me was like this is the cause. Like I had no doubt about it. And then it was like I was just so like I just couldn't believe like it was something so basic, right? Like wearing a pair of like $20 like safety glasses was the solution, versus like these prescription drugs and all these like so-called experts in the industry that could like not even then turn around and tell me that it's in my head, right? I'm like, and that's why I was like so obsessed with it by this point. I'm like, holy shit, like I can't, like I've got to talk about this. Like, why does no one know? Like, like,
and that's what happens to us. That's what happened to me too. And it's like, it wasn't just like, oh, it took me a while to find this. I was like, people were telling me, oh, your labs are fine. You're fine. Like everything's fine. Like there's nothing else to look at. You've done your food. You've done your movement. You've done your supplements. That's the end of the story. And then to find out it's not the end of the story. It really does light a fire. So just for our newer listeners, tell us a little bit about what happens when we are, say, working on our laptop at 11 o'clock at night with all of the light bulbs on, overhead lights on. Like what is that doing to our system?
Yeah, sure. So I guess if we just look at different spectrums of light, and how they interact with us. So in our eyes, it's been known for a long time, we've got receptors that allow us to see. So they're visual receptors called rods and cones. And it wasn't until like the late 1990s, around 99, I think they discovered a new type of receptor, other receptors in the eyes, which are non-visual photoreceptors. And they are called melanopsin receptors. And what they do is they respond to different wavelengths of light, and they will send certain signals into our brain. So particularly they activate strongest under the blue light frequencies. And so what that means is in nature, we are the only natural source of blue light is the sun. So essentially our biology is wired through this melanopsin receptor pathways in our eyes to take in blue light during the daytime, send a signal into our brain to essentially regulate our body clock, right? It's our circadian rhythm, which is actually our day-night cycle, completely regulated through the either absence of blue light or blue light in the environment. So when the blue light comes into that melanopsin receptor and activates, sends a signal to our brain then instructs particular hormonal functions to occur. So that will, particularly blue light, will then activate the release of adrenaline and cortisol, which is actually quite necessary for us to have in our system during the day. That's what makes us feel awake and alert and active during the daytime. And then at nighttime, the sun sets. And then the way we've been evolved over hundreds of thousands of years, the system has evolved this way that the sun sets, there is no more blue light in the environment. The only natural light sources we have are fire. Fire is yellow, orange, and red frequencies. So the blue light is now void. And so that what that does in that pathway is the melanopsin receptors are no longer really activated under that blue light. So then that will then start to lower the cortisol and adrenaline and allow our melatonin, which is our sleep hormone, to rise. And so what that means is then if we've got high levels of melatonin. It allows us to get into a more deep and restful sleep and stay asleep. However, the modern lifestyles we live in now is the sun sets, and what do we all do? We don't want to just live in the dark, right? So we turn on all these artificial light sources, and particularly in the modern world we're in now, pretty much, I'd say all artificial light sources are now an LED-based light source. And what that means is essentially it's a new modern type of lighting, which is very, very high in the blue light frequency, extremely high. That's the more dominant frequency in these light sources. And blue light is perceived as more like a bright white light to humans. So if anything that's a bright white light will be extremely high in the blue light, and it will have very little of the yellows, orange, and red hues that we get from natural light sources in nature. And so our ancestral brain and that system that I talked about, the melanopsin receptors and that ancestral system in our brain, has no concept of that blue light from the artificial light source being different than the sun. It just thinks the sun's up. It thinks it's daytime still. So it continues to do exactly what it's designed to do, is to keep you awake and alert, because it's like solar noon essentially is the frequencies it's getting through the eyes.
Okay, so having the wrong kind of light, i.e., intense blue light, going into our eyes and at nighttime is causing total chaos, basically, in our systems.
Absolutely. So it's just causing the circadian rhythm mismatch. Essentially, your body is designed to work on a 24-hour cycle in alignment with the sun, day and night. It's just completely confused. It has no time concept of what the actual time of the day is anymore. So we use a clock to understand us, but our body uses light, and we're now we're just changing the time all over the place, and it just doesn't know what it needs to do, because it's on cycles. It knows at this time of the night I need to do this, and at this time I need to do that. It's got a schedule it works to, and we're just completely disrupting that.
So it
schedule.
would be like if we were wearing a watch and every time we looked at it, it was 12:30 in the afternoon. Even, no matter what time it was, it would be such a.
You're like,
brain. Yeah, it would totally mess with our heads. We'd have no idea where to go, where to be. And so our body is the same thing. We're pumping cortisol when we want to be sleeping. And we're so it's almost like we're putting ourselves in hyperdrive with no off switch, constantly running the engine without ever turning it off.
And then we eventually turn it off, right? And then it's like, well, hold on a minute. It went from noon to the middle of the night. Where was the late afternoon and going into the evening with the sunset and stuff like that? It's just, there's all these just bounces around. It's not because light frequencies during the day change as the sun gets higher in the sky. The blue light gets stronger and more intense. And then as we come into the later evenings, that's why you notice sunrise and sunset has a lot more red hues in it, right? And our bodies take in all those different frequencies and different amounts, and it continues to check in and sync that clock up.
Right.
It's in constant
That's so true. And the way the light moves through the day, it is a very gradual process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's super bright, and then the mid-afternoon light is a little different. The early evening light is a little different, and we basically are giving ourselves just one version of it.
And you think about what most people do. So first of all, that's the issue in the evening, right? So we're bombarded with LED lighting from overhead light sources, phones, TVs, any kind of devices, anything digital is now just even if you just open the fridge, right? It's just straight into the eyes. So we're completely confusing the brain there and thinking it's midday, and then eventually we turn the lights off, and then maybe eventually we get to sleep, and we probably have most likely suboptimal sleep, because research shows bright amounts of blue light will suppress melatonin up to 95%. A dim amount of blue light will suppress melatonin up to 80% even. So you're having significantly lowered melatonin levels. Now, does that mean you won't sleep? Not necessarily, because sleep is a very complex subject, and there's many factors that actually go into sleep. But what I can guarantee is you'll have suboptimal deep and REM sleep. So you may feel like you got good sleep. You may have felt like you were unconscious for 8 hours, that's potentially yes, but did you actually get restorative sleep? Well, the research will show no, you didn't, because your melatonin was suboptimal.
Also, like, how do you feel when you wake up in the morning? Like, I used to sleep 10 hours a night and wake up feeling awful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think of it as like running the dishwasher. Like, you can turn the dishwasher on, but if only a trickle of cold water comes out, like it's on, but it's not really doing the job. It's like, so like I'm unconscious, I'm in my bed, but all of those things that are supposed to be happening while I'm asleep are not happening.
Yeah. And then what do we do first thing in the morning? Well, most people will grab their phone. And that's like, they're literally like, okay, so you've gone from like, it's dark, so your circadian clock is thinking, and then you go and put a phone straight in your face, then it thinks it's mid-solar noon again. Like, it's like, there's so much blue light here. It just completely skips sunrise and mid-morning and all those sort of things and goes straight into like cortisol and adrenaline overload. And that's why we're living, adrenals are just in this hyper stress state constantly. And that leads to like that tired but wired feeling, and people like anxiety creeps in. And these are all kind of symptoms of like the wakefulness hormones, the adrenals, the stress hormones just being constantly elevated through the wrong types of light. And then so it's essentially your sympathetic nervous system just constantly being activated, but the parasympathetic, the rest and digest, is just not getting that. It's just not activating how it should be, and that when it's supposed to have, particularly the removal of certain frequencies to allow the state of relaxation to come on more. I guess we haven't really talked about like melatonin. It is a sleep hormone, but it's like so much more than that. And I think that's been touched on in your podcast before about actually what melatonin is. And we call it the sleep hormone, but it's actually it's a hormone that floods the body whilst you sleep, and it does so much more. It's one of the most powerful antioxidants in the body. So it's doing all the repair to the body while you sleep, right? It's cleaning up free radicals. It's cellular damage is being repaired, and melatonin is a key hormone that's used for that. So if you kind of unravel all that argument and go, oh, I sleep fine, like I sleep perfect and I get heaps of blue light at night, the argument is, well, that's cool, but biology says your melatonin is suppressed by 90%. So what's your long-term health status going to be when your body's not going through the repair mechanisms it should be doing every night with the use of melatonin?
Right. That's a really good point too, right? Because I think a lot of us hear circadian rhythm, and I certainly did when I first encountered this information. I was like, oh yeah, I think about circadian rhythms when I'm jet lagged. I got to get back on the time zone. And that's kind of it. Right. And because of what we're learning about melatonin and other, and the importance of high quality sleep to health, it's like, oh, like a dysregulated circadian rhythm, it screws up everything. Like every process in the body relies to some extent on us being regulated to our light environment.
Absolutely.
Okay. So you find the light piece of the puzzle. It changes your life. You're like piecing together what you can find to try and still do your job and live in the modern world without having insomnia and migraines. Okay. So when did you realize, like, did you then start trying to find a way to light your home that wasn't going to kill you, or what happened next?
So from that point, I was like, when I left off, I was like, I need to like tell the world about this. Like, this is nuts. Like, I was like in such a poor state of health, and I've like completely turned it around. And so I just like, that's when I started my business. I just stood up a website, and I was like, I'm just going to like import, like, how I bought those glasses for $20? Well, I'm going to buy like 50 of them, and I'm just going to start a website, and I'm going to start like educating people, and everyone's going to come and they're going to buy them. I'm going to like help all these people, right? And like I started and like people were like, you are nuts, you are crazy, right. What are you doing? Like, because it's 2015, no one knows what I'm talking about. So it was like kind of like, oh, it's like, okay, this is when the world's not quite ready for this sort of stuff, right? Like, but I was persistent. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to sit here. I'm going to continue to build out our website, write blogs, and talk about it. And so from that point, I guess I just continued to like research, and then was like, okay, well, so for a number of years we just sold glasses, and that was kind of thing, and started to get a little bit of traction. People were like, oh yeah, I kind of get what the issue is here. Like we were very much in the infancy of the digital age back then. I think it was like the iPhone 2 or 3, and now we're like, the iPhone 15. So a lot's happened since then. Like it wasn't so commonplace for people to have smartphones, and there wasn't big screens everywhere. So, and LED lighting wasn't throughout the homes at this point. It was still a lot of incandescent, so it wasn't as much of a problem. So I guess that's why it was hard to show people when not all of their life was consumed through different light sources, or being just like bathed in all this lighting. But I guess I was persistent at it, and then a few years in, I was just sort of sitting there, and I was like, myself getting a little bit annoyed with the glasses and having to put them on all the time and stuff. And I was just like looking up at our lights, and we just moved into a new house, and I was like looking at the lights. I was like, these are very odd lights. Like they're not, because they're kind of like in Australia and New Zealand, they have these like recessed sealed lightings, and lights like they don't take a light bulb. And I was like, I'm sure that can't be good, eh? Like, and I was like, what about? And I was like sitting with my glasses. And I was like, what about though? Like, if I stopped it at the source, I was like looking at it, and I was like, this is now the biggest problem in my environment. It's like the screens are a problem and everything, but like, there's a lot of lights in my house that all get turned on at night, and now like it's quite easy just to walk away from the screen or just limit your screen time. But now I've got a whole house full of these lights, and I can't live in the dark. I've got stuff to do in the evening. And I was like, well, how about we try and solve this problem? That was kind of what I thought. I was like, I'm sure I can come up with a solution that makes it so I don't have to continue to walk around with my glasses everywhere in the house, right? And
yes, because I'm with you. The blue blockers are amazing. Like when I want to watch a movie on a Friday night, or if I try to turn my laptop off before it gets dark, but occasionally there's a deadline or something, you have to have it on. Like those blue blockers, we have a basket of them, orange lenses for the night, like absolutely save your life. But yes, for walking around my home, I would prefer it. I would prefer to not have to have them on. Yeah. Because
you take them off, and you're like, oh, where are they again? And you're like, oh no, the lights are like, it just becomes this big.
And the dog chews them, and then the kids step on them.
There is definitely a time and a place for the glasses, and I still think that to this day. And for most of those use cases, you said, it's like, I've got to go on a screen, I've got to do this, I want to watch a movie, or I'm traveling, or like there's a whole bunch of use cases. But if you're fortunate enough to have like circadian-friendly lighting in your house, it just makes your lifestyle at home so much easier to just get around without having to stress out about like turning on a light and then not having your glasses and that sort of stuff. So I sat there and was like, okay, well, I have known nothing about creating light bulbs, but I'm going to work it out. So I sat there for quite a while, and just working with lighting engineers and really getting to understand just what makes up our modern lighting and what the problems are with it, and how can we solve them? How can we reverse engineer it so it doesn't have those problems? And there are a number of problems with our modern lighting beyond blue light. So I had to kind of sit there and look at them, and I can kind of run through what they are.
Yeah. So what are the other problems? So there's what you were talking about earlier, like the color of the light is like this like super intense white, which is bluish white light. Yeah. And then so there's the color. So what else?
Yeah. So interestingly though, and that just to add to that is like, we actually had warm white in our house. Like, and I'm like, this is not warm. Like, that is a little bit of the argument that people are like, I don't need your lighting, we've got warm white. And I'm like, nah, like I've got like very expensive spectrometers and stuff now. And I'm like, have to show people, I'm like, this is your warm white. There's a huge spike in the blue. It is less, but I mean, it's still physiologically a lot more than what you well beyond what you should be getting anyway, and it's still having that same effect. So just a warm white, cool white, whatever white, as long if it's an LED standard conventional light, it's got lots of blue light in it, it's not good for us for all those reasons we've talked about. But beyond that, one of the other big problems we see is flicker. So what flicker is your light source turning off and on very, very quickly. In most cases, you won't see it, like as the human eye will not be able to see it. But what it actually is all our lighting runs on, all our mains power is AC, which is alternating current, and our lighting is on that as well. And what that is essentially the way that the power is moved from a substation into your home is they have to like pulse it down the line. It makes it much more efficient to get it from the substation into your house. And so they're pulsing it at a frequency to do that. And the frequency they're pulsing it is normally like 50 or 60 hertz. And that means it's pulsing on and off about 100 to 120 times a second. And so what that means for your light source, and particularly LED lighting, is more prone to having issues, is because the light source itself is digital. So it's either on or off. It's either got power and it's on and it's producing light, or it doesn't and it's off and it's not producing light. So what that means is you've got a light bulb plugged into your mains power. You've got power coming in, which is pulsing 120 times a second. The light is turning on and off 120 times a second. And what's the issue with that? Well, it's a very unnatural light source to us as humans, because there's nothing in nature that pulses like that. The sun is a direct current light. It's just on, constantly producing heat and light. So
on sub level, it's like to our cells, it's like a strobe light or something, where it's just like this really intense stimulation that we're not consciously aware of, but it's still affecting our physiology on some level.
Yeah, so it causes a stress response as well.
Okay.
So it's essentially a flickering light source. I don't know if you've ever been into like a nightclub or whatever, and it's this intense strobe light. It's essentially causing that same response, which is, and if you go to the far end of the scale of like symptoms of it, it's like epilepsy, right? Like they really respond very sensitive to that type of light, particularly a strobe light. So if you're just under this lighting constantly, and it's constantly causing a low level of stress in the body, combined with the blue light as well. It's like this, it's all combining together to just make the problem worse. And the main issue as well is actually also introduces like headaches, migraines, and eye strain as well, which are also symptoms of like overexposure to blue light. So it's like the symptoms and crossover are very similar. So you put them both together, and the compounding effect is not great of a light source to be under. And we didn't really have as much of an issue with our older type of incandescent type lighting. The reason for that was that type of lighting is heat source type lighting. So I like to call it like analog type lighting. It's there's filaments inside it that get heated up, and the heat produces light. So when the electricity is pulsing in, the filament can't completely cool down and shut off, because it's taking there is actually flicker in incandescent lighting, believe it or not. A lot of people think there's no flicker in it. There is. It does go up and down in brightness slightly, but it's not such a harsh on and off like we get from the LED. So it's
that's true, because when you turn off an incandescent bulb, it does take a few seconds. You can kind of watch it before it's fully dark, right? Okay, so that reduces the flicker. So we're really living in a perfect storm where the rise of tablets, laptops, smartphones, and the rise of the LED light bulb kind of coalesced over the last sort of 10 years to create a monumentally bad situation for our bodies.
Yeah. And there's one more thing you can actually throw into the mix there, into the cocktail of inappropriate lighting is EMFs, right? So EMFs are a very big problem with modern lighting as well. So when we talk about EMFs, like a lot of people think like Wi-Fi or radio frequencies. That actually is an issue with a lot of lighting as well, because it's smart lighting as well, right? So they've got like Wi-Fi transmitters in every single light bulb, but that's not the main issue we look at. Is we're looking at like magnetic fields, electric fields, and dirty electricity, which are all kind of different frequencies that, again, we're biologically probably not appropriate to be around, like these frequencies that are actually causing harm to ourselves as well. And so a lot of the modern lighting is anything that's kind of plugged into a mains power will have magnetic and electric fields to a degree. But the issue with a lot of the poorly made cheap lighting is it will emit at a very far distance, like right within the field of where you are. So again, it's like it's weakening your cells, it's weakening your immune system. There's plenty of research around what these type of EMFs do, and it's just not beneficial to our health. And now if you put like 40 of these light bulbs through your house, you're just living in this unnatural kind of frequencies that we just really shouldn't be exposed to, on top of the blue light, on top of the flicker. So so if you kind of like looking at all aspects of like health and going, well, do I want, because you could like go, well, I've got a light bulb that has no blue light in it, but it's like, well, does it flicker and does it have EMFs? Because then is the net effect still like, it's probably, it's slightly better, but like, is it actually going to make a notable difference to your health outcomes if you're still exposed to that day in, day out?
Whoa. And this is why, I think it's so important to understand health through the lens of quantum biology, right? Because if you understand human systems from a quantum level, then you look at all this and it would be the way, we feel about living in a moldy environment or living next to a toxic waste dump. We're like, oh my God, no, like that's so bad. You can't live in that. But these invisible frequencies or these light frequencies tend to get dismissed because most people don't understand the quantum functioning of the human system. And so once you understand that, like it becomes very clear how damaging these things are.
I think people find it hard to understand when it's like you can't see it, so it's not like affecting you. It's like, oh, you can't see the flicker, or can't see the frequencies of like the electric fields or the Wi-Fi or stuff. So no, it's definitely not that. Like that's doing this to me, sort of thing. People are quite in denial about that. It's not until you can actually physically see something. Like it's like quite interesting if I've got all these meters, I'll take a flicker meter around to someone's house. It's not until you like put the flicker meter on and it makes a noise, like you're like, here's your light bulb and it's going crazy, and here's this, and they're like, oh, holy shit, like what is that, sort of thing? Like the brain can actually start to go, oh, hold on, I can actually hear or see something showing me a difference in the two.
Yes. Yeah, and those instruments are really good for measuring it, and then we can put the pieces together and be like, okay. And I think too with the denial. And I understand this, and I felt like this as well, right? Like there's just so much stuff that's bad for us. We're like, well, another thing. Yeah. However, what I think the great good news is that light is relatively easy. I mean, and EMFs they're a little trickier, but still, it's like once we know, we can get a handle on it. We can create an environment that is supportive of our health. And so you set out to make a light bulb, or to make a range of light bulbs that addressed the color, temperature, the flicker, and the EMF. So thank you. Because now I can do a podcast on this and instead of being like, sorry, you're all screwed, incandescent bulbs are now illegal in the United States and LEDs are killing you. Okay, goodbye. No, there are solutions. So one solution could be to just, light candles. But I think most of us that's not quite practical. So let's talk about the light bulbs. So I think that conversation can feel overwhelming too, right? Because as you were talking about, most homes now come with this recessed lighting in the ceiling. So you've got like, I don't know, there's probably 50 light bulbs like just on the downstairs level of my house. And I'm like, oh my God, I got to change all those light bulbs. But actually, but we don't, right? It's like, if we keep those off and then have your light bulbs in strategically placed lamps and low lighting, that's a good solution, right?
Yeah. Well, there's different degrees of like to the different scales of like how far you can take it, or you might slowly move over time. But like, to start with, like 1 or 2 light bulbs is like perfect, because like the idea is like once you're once you get to the evening and you've like maybe had dinner and you're just relaxing, you actually want to shut off all your overhead lighting anyway. and having like a couple of strategically placed lamps around the place is more than enough lighting. Like, I feel like people have got used to this like over illuminated environments we live in. You go into some houses like 10 lights on in this one room. Like, why do we need that much light?
Yeah.
It's like, you'd be surprised what one light bulb how much it can light up a room. Like, particularly just in a lower lit space, because like the idea is you should be bringing the brightness down. You should be not having light come from overhead. It should be more like eye level and below. If you're trying to like almost like replicate like how it would be in nature. But like, I mean, yeah, like a couple of light bulbs is a great place to start. And from there, it's like looking at all the different ways that we do interact with light in the evening, and you can start to to make life a bit more you can create your environment to be a bit more convenient to use, I would say. So like you can start to go, okay, well, we do use our bedroom in the evening a bit, so we might swap out the overheads in there as well, just to make life a bit easier, particularly if I get up like early in the morning and I do want to turn on the lights, but I don't want like this bright white light. So I can actually turn on and have a more warmer light to use in the morning or the evening. Then you can start to look at things like, like motion night lights down your hallway. So you can just like walk in it. It's like guides you down your hallway. Those are like other cool techniques.
Right. As opposed to leaving a light on, you could just have those little motion ones.
Yep.
And so what color are those? Are those like orange or red or?
So we've got like, I guess if someone landed on our website and on our lighting page, you'll be like, whoa, I'm actually quite overwhelmed as well, because we've been doing it now for like 8 years, right? So we've kind of slowly built things out over time and created all these different solutions. But there's amber and red, and a lot of people are like, what's the difference? Like, why would I want amber or why would I want red? And so easiest way to differentiate the two is the amber ones block all the blue light for the reasons we've already talked about. The red ones block all the blue light, but they also block the green light frequencies. And people are, okay, why am I blocking the green light as well? You haven't really talked about green light at all. And the reason we talk about green light a little bit, so there was a piece of research done in 2005, and what that looked at was all the different light frequencies and how much or to what degree melatonin was suppressed. And so they didn't just look at blue, they looked across all the frequencies. And so blue light is measured in nanometers. So the wavelengths are measured in nanometers. And so blue light ranges from 400 to 500 nanometers. And so in the study, they found the peak disruption of melatonin was at 464 nanometers. So that's pretty much just past midway of the blue light frequencies. So that's where the peak disruption is happening. And just believe it or not, like all our lights that we have in our home, guess what frequency of blue they are? They're like at their highest around 455 to 465 nanometers. So right in the middle of that peak disruption zone is right where all our lighting is produced. It's like
your typical LED light bulb that you would buy, at the hardware store or whatever, is like peak circadian disruption.
Absolutely. Yep. Your phones, everything. It's like, I feel like it's a little bit of a setup here, right?
Yeah, like we really couldn't have made it. We couldn't have made it any worse. Okay.
Yeah. But anyway, so back to like that kind of study. And so it was what actually ended up, the results was a big bell curve. So the peak of that bell curve was at the 464 nanometers, and then it came back down the other side of the bell curve. And blue light finishes at the 500 nanometer mark. Well, the curve was still back on its way down right through to 550 nanometers. So green light ranges from 550 to 570. So about 3/4 of the green light spectrum does suppress our melatonin by a significantly less degree than blue light, but it's having an impact. So if you're looking at that and going, well, most biohackers and health nuts want to be optimal, right? They're like, well, if there's going to be some level of degree of suppression of melatonin here, I don't want that. Like, get that out of my life, right? So that's where like the hardcore people have the red lights, right? And like, well, and I'm not suggesting like you go and you fit out your whole home in like red lights and like look like a brothel or anything like that. But like, there's different degrees, right? Like for example, we have amber lights throughout most of our house, and we'll use them in the early evening while we're cooking, while we're just doing task-based stuff. Then we switch all that off, and like, for example, our bedside lamps, a couple of lamps in our bathroom, and a couple of lamps in our living area are all the red lighting. So we kind of just like slowly, so there's like early evening is amber, so until like the sun sets and gets more further down. So we just take it one step further into the red. Later on in the evening, at least an hour before bed, we have no blue or green light exposure at all. And I guess it just allows things to be more optimal. But like, again, it's not a necessity, but like it is really good. And it is really good to have red light if you need to get up in the middle of the night, because you don't want any disruption to your melatonin. If you have to get up to go to the bathroom, or you've got kids or a newborn, you have to attend to anything in the middle of the night, like if you have to use like the amber light, it's okay, but like the red is going to be so much better, because it's just going to allow you to drop back into that sleep, back into your sleep a lot quicker.
Okay. All right. So this is really good. So big picture, what we're trying to do is to keep our indoor lighting as close to possible as sort of what's happening outside, which is like a gradual change in the brightness and a gradual change in the color temperature of the light.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm listening to this podcast and then I'm like, oh my God, my light bulbs are terrible. So, and we've kind of touched on it, but let's go over it again. So step one would be to identify a few key lamps that you use in the evening and order a nice amber light bulb.
Yep.
For those lamps. Okay.
Get a lamp if you don't have one to start with. Or we sell like integrated lamps as well, with another option where it's just like an all-in-one solution for the light and the lamp. But the idea is at least have a couple of light sources that can take one of our light bulbs that are just in a lamp form sort of thing, that you can position on near your couch or wherever you hang out in the evening. You just want to have a bit of light. Yeah.
Okay.
That would be step one.
That would be step one. And then as you get close to bedtime, so in the bedroom, then you want to move into a more red light. Yep. Okay. Yep. And this is where okay, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so you might most people have bedside lamps, so you might just install a couple of red light bulbs in your bedside lamps.
Okay. So so we have red light bulbs in our bedside lamps, and then we have more kind of orangey lights. I guess they're probably more amber in the overhead fixture that I try not to turn on, but I use in the evening, but not later in the night. But you also have a couple products that I love, which is the little clip-on. It's like the little book light, the reading light, like that you used to see, but it's red, and it charges in the wall. It does. So you just charge it up and then you clip it on your book. And I find like in that last half hour where I'm reading before bed, even the lamp feels like a lot, but I love these little red book lights, and you just stick them in your purse. And then no matter where you are, if you're traveling, I take it out, I clip it on the shelf in the bathroom in a hotel. They're so good.
Yeah. You want to see my suitcase when it's traveling? Like one's just devoted to book lights, lamps, light bulbs, go all in one, and the clothes in the other. But yeah, those things are like really handy, because it's like they're battery operated, so you charge them like you charge your cell phone, and then they've got like a really long life battery. But they're so versatile because they've got like 3 brightness settings on them, so you can kind of like adjust the brightness. And actually, our newest one, you can actually switch between red and amber in the same one. So
fancy.
And in between red, orange, and amber. So it's like 3 different modes in the same book light, right? This is now the level of stuff we're trying to bring out just to help. Because before it's like, I've got my red book light and my amber one, and I don't know which one to use. But yeah, like you said, like use cases like traveling, you just want to go away for the night or something. You just like before we had them and we had our light bulbs, I used to literally pack light bulbs with me when I went traveling, and I'd go around. I did that too. Go around like the Airbnb or the hotel and like change them all out, and then we'd leave and I'd forget to take them with us. I was like, oh God, I forgot my light bulbs. And then I'm like, someone's going to turn on that light and be like,
what is? I did that one time. I was staying. A friend of mine I was staying in his house because I was watching all the children and he was out of town. And so I was staying at his house, and then I packed up all my stuff, I left, and he came back from his trip, and he went to go to bed, and he turned on his bedside lamp, and he was like, what is this? I had forgotten. So I saw him out the next day, and he was like, Meredith, did you change my light bulb? And I was like, oh, yeah, sorry about that. And then he's like, is that for all this like circadian stuff that you keep talking about? I'm like, yes, that's what that was. I'm like, your old light bulb's in the drawer of your bedside table should you need it. He's like, all right. I'm like, those red light bulbs are hard to get. I'll like give it back to me. I'll be happy to take it back. He's like, okay. And then the next day he was like, actually,
I'll keep it.
I kind of like it. So it's that, and that's the thing I find with all of this stuff, right? It's like, it's one thing to hear about it, but when you actually try it, you're like, it really does, like when you like have the last hour or the last time of, the last part of the day in more natural lighting or natural. And by that, I mean lighting that's closer to what's happening outside. It just like, it's kind of hard to explain, but like the wind down period, like it feels gentler. It feels calmer. Like by the time I'm ready to go to sleep, I'm like, I'm out.
Yeah. And I don't think people realize like they don't, right? Like we're not designed to stay awake hours and hours past sunset. Like we're artificially being kept awake by our light, the lighting that we turn on and use to see, right? So like it's quite interesting when you see people that are used to that and they're like, no, I'm like a night owl, and then they start trying this and like, holy, I just can't stay awake in the evenings, right? I'm so tired. And it's like, that's how you're supposed to feel. You're supposed to wind down. The evenings is supposed to be about relaxing, winding down, and then going to sleep, not being like, I stay awake until like 1 a.m. every night. Like it's, So that a lot of people don't have the connection as to how they are being kept awake is actually being artificially stimulated by all the lighting that they're using to do that essentially.
Yes. And you get that kind of surge of adrenaline and you get like, oh, I get my second wind around 8 o'clock and then I go. And it's like, that's actually not natural, right? Like that is an artificially created wave of energy. And I hear that all the time from our practitioners, and Carrie Bennett, who teaches in the certification, she always says that. She's like, she calls them my night owls. She's like, I have so many clients who come in and they are diehard night owls. They swear they haven't, 30 years they've been living as a night owl, and they start to train their circadian rhythm, and they're like, oh my goodness, I get tired at night early.
But then the benefit to that as well on the other flip side is like you actually wake up not long after sunrise, right? And it's like easy to get up, like because you actually get good sleep, like because we're now into this like normalized society as well that you kind of like you feel real tired and like you need to have like a cup of coffee to get going in the morning and stuff. Like that's not normal either. It's like we're just like artificially now stimulating our body to kick back into like cortisol again and adrenaline. It's like they're just like constantly living off like artificial stimuli to allow the body to function, which is not once you get
it's
that kind
unsustainable at some point the crash is going to come.
Yeah, correct.
Maybe sooner, maybe later, but it will come. And that's true. And the flip side of that gradual evening wind down is that when I go outside in the early morning light, sometimes I'm out at sunrise, sometimes I sleep a little longer. But when I do go out in that early morning light, it's like a gradual sort of tingly feeling. And then, I have a cup of coffee, but like an hour and a half after I've woken up. And it's just to like get in the habit of feeling the natural rhythm of the body and the way the body feels when it's living the way it's supposed to. It's like, oh, this is really different. And I like, it's a little bit, it's surprising to realize how far we've pushed ourselves outside of the frame of where we're meant to be.
Yeah. It's an interesting one because it's like, some people are like, oh, so you're kind of like, oh, well, so we shouldn't like live in like the modern world and like, do we need to like go back to caveman days? I'm kind of like, no, like technology is great. It's like done so many things for advancement of humanity, right? But like, it's just like finding ways to like interface with it so it doesn't have such detrimental effects. And so like we're not saying you need to turn all your lights off and live in the dark, but it's like just alter things slightly, and you can still live that environment, that lifestyle you want, but it's just going to be slightly more swung towards like how our bodies should be naturally behaving and how our biology is designed to work. Because if you don't, you're just going to be on an uphill battle.
Yeah.
Forever sort of thing.
Yeah,
right?
forever.
Like,
yeah.
Yeah,
and that's
like
a good point too. Like it doesn't take much. Like we're not saying like, oh, you have to overhaul everything, right? Like having going to your website and buying the little red reading light. I think it's like $28. It's not a huge investment. And like using that in the last hour before bed and going outside in the morning instead of looking at your phone, like just those two things alone can have a huge, huge impact.
Yeah.
And so I do like to repeat that, because for people who are new to this, you don't want to like totally overwhelm yourself, but like just do what you can do. And I think your products are so helpful for that. So let us know how we can find them. So it's blockbluelight.com. Is that right?
Yep. So just blockbluelight.com. We've got many different sites like for different regions, but if you just go to that website, you'll get redirected if you're in Australia or New Zealand or UK or Europe or stuff. But yeah, go to blockbluelight.com. So we've got a lighting section on there, lots of different products on there. Like particularly for the US market now, we've started to do like the BR30 bulbs for the can lights. We're doing like retrofit recessed lighting for can lights and stuff like that as well. But beyond the actual products on our website, we've got a whole bunch of resources and like blog articles. Like I've spent the last 8 years writing blogs on this sort of stuff. So there's about
fabulous.
Like about 150 different articles, and they delve into all sorts of things on light and different aspects of light and all sorts.
Oh, that's great. We should link to those in our portal. I don't think we do, but that's good. That's a very good resource.
But beyond that, if someone's new to it all and they're like come to our website and they're like, oh my God, like what is all this? Like we've got like a live chat function. So just like chat to us on like Messenger or send us an email. Like got a whole support team and they're all like trained by yourself here. So like they know what they're talking about. So we're very open to like if someone wants to explain like, hey, like this is my situation, like what do you recommend like for lighting? Because like obviously we've got there's all different combinations of stuff right through to the person who's just like, hey, I'm all in, like, and they want to like fit out their whole house. They're like, okay,
I was going to say that I was scaling it down for the person who, but yeah, if you're in the middle of renovating or building a house and you want it to be circadian optimized, you could really go to town, right? And just like do the whole thing.
Yeah, like send us your house plans and we'll like put recommendations on where your lights can go and stuff. Because we have things like strip lighting and stuff like that. So you can do strip lighting under your like kitchen splashback and bathroom vanities. You can get quite
that's
creative
amazing.
and inventive with it all. So so we've kind of started to try and think about everything. So slowly
because the kitchen the kitchen is tricky. Is in the winter we're often still in there, depending what hemisphere you live in, but it's dark so early.
Yeah, correct. Yep.
Okay. Fantastic. Okay. Well, once again, I really recommend people to go there. And you do also sell blue blocking glasses. I haven't fully covered those on the podcast, but I've mentioned them a lot. So if someone is watching a screen, I use them mostly for watching TV or
we haven't really covered the whole aspect of daytime and blue light, but that's probably a whole nother topic around the aspects, because we even can go into like we actually do lighting for daytime as well, which does have blue light in it, right? Like blue light isn't something that should be villainized, and you should like it's not like you need to remove it from your life completely, because it is actually essential for our ability for our neurotransmitters and mood regulation, energy regulation, all that sort of stuff. So we've got a lot of information on that on our website too, but certainly you need to look at, don't take all this information that you just want to block it all completely, because that's a common misconception that people will start to go, oh, I need to put these on, like, oh, it's everywhere, like during the day, and like, because like you can actually start to cause more problems than good if like, if you don't get enough light during the day, you'll start to lower your dopamine and serotonin and your cortisol will drop too low. You'll feel like unmotivated, tired. You'll do the opposite, right? You'll make your brain think it's nighttime during the middle of the day because there's no blue light. So I just preface that, but we do have a bunch of information around that, and a lot of that plays into also is like the eye strains, headaches, and migraines that people get and stuff. There is absolutely, that is kind of linked to the overexposure of blue light. We see the prevalence of like those clear lens blue blocking glasses that are like on Amazon for $20. I would just probably, without going into too much detail, probably avoid them. Like it's like, they're just not founded on any science, and they're not going to do anything for it. Anything.
So the rule of thumb with the blue blocking glasses is if they're genuinely blocking blue light, they're going to have dark orange or reddish lenses, and B, you only want to wear those dark orange or reddish lenses when it's dark out or as it's getting dark, because it's going to tell your body it's nighttime. So if it's daytime, you don't want to wear them, even if you're on your computer or in harsh lighting. Yeah.
The caveat to that, there are proper daytime glasses you can buy, which are like a yellow tint, or I wouldn't say a clearish tint, that are designed just to reduce those right frequencies of blue light down. So then you don't get those symptoms. But then on the counter, then they're rubbish for nighttime. They're not going to help you with your sleep. So it's kind of like finding it's all about context and about like the right type of the quantities of blue light that you should and shouldn't be getting at different times of the day or night, and using appropriate light filtering technology to either completely remove it or just reduce it by a certain amount. But you kind of nailed it. Don't wear anything that's orange or red shouldn't be worn during the daytime.
Okay. But they're great for the evening. Yes. And that's it. And I am so grateful for you coming on and explaining this all to us.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome to be here. And like I said, if anyone has any questions, just feel free to shoot us a message and we'll get back to you.
Okay, perfect. Thanks so much, Daniel.
Thank you. Cheers.
This has been the Quantum Biology Collective podcast. To find a practitioner who works from this point of view, visit our directory at quantumbiologycollective.org. If you are a practitioner, definitely check out our Applied Quantum Biology certification to consider as part of your continuing education plan. You can also just jump into our email community. We'd love to hear from you. Again, that's at quantumbiologycollective.org.